The Galactic Council chamber was designed to make beings feel small. It succeeded. A sphere of artificial starlight hovered at its center, projecting a perfect illusion of the galaxy. Every system mapped, every border defined, every civilization reduced to glowing points of compliance. Around it, tier upon tier of alien delegates watched in absolute silence. And at the very center of that silence stood one human. Commander Elias Varn didn't move. Didn't bow. Didn't speak. He simply watched them the way a soldier watches a battlefield, quietly measuring threats, exits, intentions. "You stand accused," the High Arbiter announced, its voice resonating in layered tones that felt almost physical, "on behalf of your species." Elias clasped his hands behind his back. "Of surviving." A ripple passed through the chamber, annoyance, offense, unease. "Of destabilizing entire sectors," another delegate hissed, its elongated form flickering with bioluminescent agitation. "Where humans go, conflict follows." "Where conflict exists," Elias replied calmly, "humans tend to end it." "That is precisely the problem," the Arbiter said. "You do not respect equilibrium, you impose outcomes." Elias allowed himself a faint smile. "Funny, that's what you call leadership when you do it." The chamber tightened. Even without human expressions, their discomfort was obvious. A crystalline being rotated slowly, its voice chiming like breaking glass. "Your species adapts beyond predictive modeling. You weaponize hardship. You turn extinction-level events into stepping stones." Elias didn't deny it. "Because it was true." "You burn your own worlds," another voice added. "You sacrifice entire systems to contain threats we have never even cataloged." That too was true. But they didn't understand why. The Arbiter raised a limb, silencing the chamber. "The Galactic Council exists to preserve order," it said. "Your species introduces chaos, unchecked growth, unacceptable risk." Elias exhaled slowly, glancing up at the projection of the galaxy above them. "So clean. So organized. So naive. You think the universe cares about your order?" he asked quietly. No one answered. "You think it follows rules, boundaries, agreements?" His gaze dropped back to them, sharper now. "Out there, beyond your maps, there are things that don't negotiate, things that don't stop." A murmur spread again, thinner this time. "Uncertainty." "You've seen nothing," Elias continued. "You've explored safe space, protected lanes. You call yourselves advanced because you haven't had to fight to exist." The Arbiter's voice hardened. "This proceeding is not an invitation for rhetoric." "No," Elias agreed softly. "It's a mistake." Silence hit harder than any outburst. For a brief moment, something flickered across the chamber. Not anger, not pride. Fear. Then it was gone. "The decision has been reached," the Arbiter declared. Of course it had. It was always going to end this way. Humanity is hereby classified as an unstable, high-risk civilization. Elias closed his eyes for half a second. "Not in defeat. In confirmation. You are to be exiled beyond council space. All trade, communication, and alliance privileges are permanently revoked." The words echoed like distant explosions. "Any attempt to re-enter governed systems will be met with force." A pause. "Effective immediately." The galaxy above them shifted, human-controlled systems dimming, then disappearing entirely from the projection. Erased. Just like that. Elias opened his eyes again, staring up at the absence where humanity used to be. No anger. No shock. Just a quiet, steady resolve. Guards moved in, tall, armored figures from a species bred for enforcement. Their movements were precise, efficient. Elias didn't resist as they took position beside him. "Do you have any final statement?" the Arbiter asked. For a moment, it almost sounded like curiosity. Elias looked around the chamber one last time. At the beings who thought they had everything under control. At the galaxy they believed they understood. And he spoke, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a calm certainty that cut deeper than any threat. "You're wrong about us." A faint pause. "We're not the danger." The Arbiter didn't respond. Out there, Elias continued, his voice lowering slightly, there are things that don't just destroy civilizations. His eyes hardened. They erase them. A flicker of unease passed through the chamber again. Subtle, but real. We fought them, Elias said. We learned, we adapted. He tilted his head slightly. And we survived. The guards tightened their grip, beginning to escort him away. Elias didn't struggle. Didn't look back until the very last step before the chamber doors. Then he stopped, just for a second, and turned his head enough for his voice to carry. One day, he said quietly, something worse than us is going to find you. No one spoke. No one moved. And when it does, his gaze swept across them one final time. You're going to wish we were still here. The door sealed behind him with a deep, final sound. Inside the chamber, silence lingered. Heavy, uncomfortable, unfinished. The arbiter raised its limb again, dismissing the assembly. Proceedings concluded. Delegates began to disperse, their movements controlled, but not quite as confident as before. Because somewhere, buried beneath logic and authority, a single thought remained. What if the human wasn't wrong? Far beyond the edge of mapped space, past the last monitored star, beyond the reach of council sensors, something stirred. Not born, not awakened, but noticed, and for the first time in a very long time. It wasn't alone anymore. For 43 years, the galaxy knew peace. Not the fragile, uneasy quiet that follows war, but something cleaner. Controlled, predictable, trade routes stabilized, borders held, conflicts dissolved before they could escalate. The Galactic Council called it a new era. Privately, they called it validation. Humanity had been the variable, the disruption, the anomaly. Remove them and everything aligned. That was the theory. For a while, it seemed true. Until the first system went dark. It was a minor colony on the outer edge of Council territory. Agricultural, low population, no military presence. When contact was lost, it barely registered as a priority. Communication failures weren't uncommon that far out. A probe was dispatched. It never returned. Then a second system went silent. This time, a patrol fleet was sent. They vanished mid-transit. No distress signal. No debris field. No warp signature collapse. Just gone. The council began to pay attention. Emergency sessions were called. Analysts compiled data. Patterns were sought, debated, dismissed. Piracy, one delegate insisted. Impossible, another countered. No known faction possesses that level of stealth or power. A natural phenomenon, then. Natural phenomena do not selectively erase military vessels. The arguments spiraled. Then the third system disappeared. This one was heavily populated. Billions of lives. Gone between one scheduled transmission and the next. Panic didn't spread immediately. It crept. Slow, infectious. Unstoppable. By the time the fourth system fell, the word containment had entered the conversation. By the sixth, it was replaced with unknown threat. And by the eighth, fear had a name, even if they didn't understand it yet. The breakthrough came from a damaged deep space probe. It drifted into monitored territory, systems failing, transmission unstable. Recovery teams secured it and rushed its data to the council chamber. For the first time in decades, every delegate attended. The recording began. A planetary surface, lush, developed, alive. Cities stretched across continents, lights shimmering against the night. Normals. Peaceful. Then the sky changed. Not gradually. Not violently. It simply broke. A thin line appeared across the upper atmosphere, glowing faintly, as if reality itself had been scored by an invisible blade. The line widened. Split. And then it opened. No explosion, no sound, just a silent tearing of existence, revealing something behind it that shouldn't have been there. Darkness. Not the absence of light, but something deeper, something that swallowed light without reflection. The chamber fell completely silent. From that fracture, something emerged. It didn't move like a ship. Didn't resemble life. It was a shape that refused definition, edges folding into themselves, dimensions overlapping in ways that made the recording distort and flicker. Sensors on the probe went wild, then failed, but the visual feed held. For a few more seconds, the thing drifted downward, not with speed, not with intent as they understood it, but with inevitability. And as it reached the upper atmosphere, the planet reacted. Storms ignited instantly, oceans surged, the crust trembled as if trying to tear itself apart to escape. It didn't matter. The entity reached the surface. And then, the world began to collapse. Not explode. Not burned. Collapse. Cities folded inward like paper crushed by an invisible hand, continents warped, the entire planet compressed, shrinking, distorting. Until it was gone. No debris. No energy surge. No aftermath. Just empty space where something had existed moments before. The recording ended in static. No one spoke. No one moved. The silence in the council chamber was heavier than it had been on the day of humanity's exile. Because this time, there was no control. What was that? A delegate finally whispered. No answer came. Data analysts scrambled, replaying the footage, isolating frames, searching for anything. Any clue, any weakness, any pattern. There was nothing. It doesn't attack, another voice said slowly. It doesn't target, it doesn't engage. It erases, someone else finished. The words settled like a verdict. Erases. A chilling realization followed close behind. There had been no communication. No warning. No negotiation. No demand. Which meant this wasn't a war. It wasn't conquest. It wasn't even destruction in the way they understood it. It was something else. Something worse. A presence that reduced entire worlds to nothing without reason or hesitation. And then from the far end of the chamber, a quiet voice broke through the fear. The humans warned us. Heads turned. No one argued. Because suddenly memories surfaced, dismissed statements, ignored reports, classified encounters from decades past. Human fleets burning their own colonies. Human forces withdrawing from unexplained regions of space. Humanity choosing survival over expansion. At the time, it had seemed reckless. Primitive. Now, it looked like experience. The arbiter remained still for a long moment. Then it spoke, its voice lower than before. Locate them. No hesitation this time. No debate. Find humanity. Because for the first time since the Council's formation, they understood something fundamental. They were not the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. Not even close. And the only species that might know how to face what was coming was the one they had cast into the dark. Far beyond their reach. Far beyond their protection. Where the void had already begun to spread. And this time, it wasn't stopping. The order spread faster than panic. Find humanity. It echoed through every remaining system, coded into military directives, embedded in diplomatic channels, prioritized above all trade, all conflict, all politics. The Galactic Council didn't announce it publicly, but every fleet commander, every intelligence node, every deep space probe knew. Nothing else mattered now. They were searching for a species they had erased. And space, as it turned out, had no intention of helping. Long-range scanners swept through abandoned corridors once used by human trade vessels. Old jump routes were reopened, paths the Council had deliberately sealed decades ago. Autonomous drones plunged into gravitational storms, navigated nebulae dense enough to swallow entire fleets, and crossed radiation belts that would have crippled most known technology. Everywhere they looked, nothing. No signals. No debris. No forgotten outposts clinging to life. Humanity hadn't just left. They had vanished with intent. Expand the search radius, the arbiter ordered. We already have, an analyst replied, voice tight. We're reaching beyond mapped space. Navigation certainty is dropping below acceptable thresholds. Then lower the threshold. That alone would have been unthinkable months ago. Now it wasn't enough. Meanwhile, the disappearances continued. Another system collapsed, this time a fortified mining world surrounded by defensive platforms. The stations didn't fire. They didn't even register a target. They simply ceased to exist. Fear stopped being theoretical. It became routine. Entire sectors began evacuations. Civilian vessels flooded safe corridors. Military fleets, once symbols of control, now drifted as uncertain guardians against something they couldn't even perceive until it was too late. And still, no sign of humanity. Until the signal came. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden burst across every frequency. Just a faint, tightly encrypted transmission buried deep in background noise, detected by a survey drone operating beyond the last recognized boundary of Council space. At first, it was dismissed as interference. Then someone decrypted a fragment. The room froze. Is that? Yes, the technician whispered. It's human. The signal wasn't a distress call. It wasn't a broadcast. It was a pulse. Deliberate. Minimal. Like a beacon that didn't want to be found easily. Coordinates followed, barely stable, shifting as if the source itself was in motion or intentionally masking its location. The Council didn't hesitate. A delegation was assembled within hours. Not a fleet. Not an armada. Just enough ships to show intent without appearing as a threat. Or at least that was the idea. As they prepared to depart, one of the delegates asked the question no one wanted to voice aloud. What if they refuse? No one answered, because that possibility had already been considered. And it had no solution. The journey pushed beyond everything the Council considered safe. Stars grew sparse. Known constellations dissolved into unfamiliar patterns. Navigation systems recalibrated constantly, struggling to map a region that seemed resistant to definition. Sensor drift increasing, one pilot reported. It's like space itself isn't stable out here. Maintain course, the envoy leader ordered, though their voice carried less certainty than they would have liked. The signal grew stronger, then clearer, then suddenly, it stopped. Signal lost, the technician said. A wave of tension swept the bridge. Did we pass it? No, we're exactly on the last transmitted coordinates. Silence. Then, contact. The word cut through the air like a blade. Every screen shifted at once. Ships. Dozens. No, hundreds. They hadn't appeared. They had been there the entire time. Dark against the void, their hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Sleek, angular, precise, nothing like the designs humanity once used. These ships weren't built for exploration or diplomacy. They were built for survival. And war. The envoy fleet froze instinctively. No weapons locked onto them. No signals broadcast. Just observation. They're watching us, someone whispered. At the center of the formation, something massive loomed into focus. A structure so large it distorted surrounding space slightly, like gravity bending light. A station, the navigator said, or something like one. It dwarfed anything the Council had ever constructed. And it radiated control. Finally, the envoy transmitted. This is a delegation of the Galactic Council, the leader began, forcing steadiness into their tone. We come seeking. The reply cut in instantly. We know who you are. The voice was human. Flat controlled. Unwelcoming. A chill ran through the bridge. We request. You made your decision. Silence slammed into the conversation. The envoy leader swallowed. We were wronged. No response. Seconds stretched. Then minutes. Every sensor strained, every crew member holding their breath. And then, One ship detached from the formation. It moved slowly, deliberately, not aggressive, not cautious, judging. As it approached, its surface shifted subtly, panels adjusting, systems recalibrating, as if the vessel itself was alive in ways the Council couldn't comprehend. "Permission to scan?" a technician asked. "No," the leader said immediately. "We don't do anything that could be interpreted as hostile." The ship stopped just outside engagement range. Waiting. A docking request appeared on the envoy system. "Not sent. Imposed." The message was clear without words. "Come to us, or leave." The envoy leader hesitated. Just for a moment. Then nodded. "Prepare for docking." Because deep down, they understood something fundamental. They weren't here as equals. They weren't even here as allies. They were here as supplicants. And the beings they had cast out into the dark had not only survived, they had become something the galaxy no longer understood. Something far more dangerous than before. And far less forgiving. The docking clamps locked into place with a heavy, final sound. Inside the airlock, as the doors began to open, a single thought echoed through every mind present. What if humanity didn't want to save them? And worse, what if they had a reason not to? The airlock opened with a low, controlled hiss. No dramatic lights, no welcoming atmosphere. Just a dim corridor stretching inward, cold, metallic, precise. The envoy stepped through slowly. Every instinct screamed caution. Human architecture had changed. The walls weren't smooth. They shifted subtly, like layered plating designed to reconfigure under stress. Faint pulses of light moved beneath the surface, almost like veins carrying energy instead of blood. "This isn't civilian design," one delegate whispered. "No," the envoy leader replied quietly. "It's not." Footsteps echoed, measured, unhurried. A figure emerged from the shadows ahead. Human, unmistakably, but different. The uniform was darker, streamlined, integrated with technology that blurred the line between armor and skin. His posture was relaxed, but not in the way of someone at ease. In the way of someone who already controlled the situation. "Commander Elias Varn," the envoy leader said, recognizing him immediately. Elias stopped a few paces away. His eyes scanned them, not with curiosity, not even with hostility. "With assessment." "You took your time," he said. "No greeting. No courtesy. Just fact." The envoy leader swallowed. "We came as soon as we could locate you." Elias tilted his head slightly. "You didn't lose us." The words hung heavy. "You stopped looking." No one denied it. Silence stretched, uncomfortable and sharp. Finally, the Arbiter's representative stepped forward. "We're not here to revisit the past," they said. "We're here because we need your help." Elias' gaze shifted to them. Cold, unmoved. "That implies I have a reason to care." The statement wasn't arrogant. It was worse. It was honest. Another delegate stepped in quickly. "Entire systems are disappearing, billions of lives." "Gone," Elias finished. The envoy froze. "You've seen it," the leader said. Elias exhaled slowly, walking past them as if the conversation required movement. They followed instinctively, deeper into the ship. "We didn't just see it," he said. "We survived it." That word again. Survived. They entered a larger chamber, part command center, part war room. Holographic projections filled the space, but unlike the Council's clean models, these were chaotic. Regions of space marked in shifting red distortions. Entire sectors labeled with warning symbols the envoy couldn't interpret. "This is your galaxy," Elias said, gesturing. The envoy stared. Large portions were wrong. Distorted. Missing. "What are we looking at?" someone asked. "Reality under pressure," Elias replied. He moved closer to one of the projections. A system flared briefly, then collapsed inward, just like the footage they had seen. "The null doesn't invade territory," he continued. It consumes existence, space, matter, energy, gone, no residue, no recovery. Then how do you fight something like that? The envoy leader asked. Elias didn't answer immediately. Instead, he expanded the map further, revealing older data. Human systems, or what used to be them. Dozens of them were marked the same way, collapsed, erased. You think we destroyed our own worlds because we're reckless, Elias said quietly. The realization hit like impact. No, the Arbiter's representative whispered. Elias nodded once. We were containing it. Silence crushed the room. You knew, the envoy leader said slowly. All this time, you knew it existed. We knew enough, Elias corrected. Not everything, not at first. He tapped the display again. A sequence of events unfolded, rapid expansions, sudden collapses, human fleets withdrawing, entire sectors quarantined. We made mistakes, Elias said. We tried to study it, contain it, fight it directly. And, someone asked, though they already feared the answer. Elias looked at them. And we lost. The word landed heavier than anything before it. You're still here, the envoy leader said. Barely, Elias replied. He stepped closer, lowering his voice slightly. The null adapts, not slowly, not predictably. Every time we engaged it, it learned faster than we could respond. A chill spread through the chamber. And now it's here, Elias continued. In your space, in your systems, and you're seeing it for the first time. The envoy leader felt something sink deep in their chest. Fear, but sharper. Regret. Can it be stopped? The Arbiter's representative asked. Elias didn't answer right away. He studied them again, longer this time. Weighing something. Judging. Finally, he spoke. Maybe. Hope flickered, then dimmed as he continued. But not the way you think. What does that mean? The envoy leader pressed. Elias turned back to the projection. We survived because we stopped fighting it like an enemy. Confusion rippled. Then how? We changed, Elias said simply. The room went still. Into what? Someone asked quietly. Elias didn't respond. Instead, he zoomed the map outward, far beyond the Council's known borders. Beyond their influence. Beyond their understanding. What they saw there made their breath catch. Human space hadn't shrunk. It had transformed. Dense clusters of structures, defensive networks layered in ways that didn't follow standard physics, signals that didn't behave like normal transmissions. It wasn't just a civilization anymore. It was something else. Something engineered to survive the impossible. You came here asking for help, Elias said, his voice calm but edged with something darker now. He turned to face them fully. But you don't understand what you're asking for. The envoy leader held his gaze. Then help us understand. A long pause followed. Then Elias gave a faint, humorless smile. That's the problem, he said. You might not like the answer. And for the first time since they arrived, the council representatives realized something far worse than the null itself. Saving the galaxy might require becoming something unrecognizable. Something they had once feared. Something they had already rejected. And this time, they might not get to choose. No one spoke for several seconds. The weight of Elias' last words lingered in the air like pressure before a storm. You might not like the answer. The envoy leader straightened slightly, forcing composure back into their voice. With respect, Commander, were past preferences. Elias studied them. Not dismissively, carefully. As if deciding whether they truly understood the line they were about to cross. Good, he said finally, because what comes next isn't negotiation. A subtle shift rippled through the room. Even now the council expected leverage, compromise, structure. Elias stepped closer to the central display and dimmed it with a gesture. The projections faded. The galaxy disappeared, leaving only them. You want us to fight the null for you, he said. No, the Arbiter's representative replied quickly. With us. Elias' expression didn't change. That's not how this works. Silence. If we engage, he continued, we take control. A few delegates stiffened immediately. Control of what? One demanded. Elias didn't hesitate. Everything. The word landed like impact. Your fleets, he said. Your defenses, your logistics, your communications, every asset you have that could even remotely influence this war. That's one delegate started. Necessary, Elias cut in. His tone sharpened, not louder but harder. You don't understand the enemy. You don't understand the battlefield. And you definitely don't understand the cost of hesitation. The envoy leader raised a hand, silencing the others. What you're asking, they said carefully, is total operational authority over the entire council. Yes. No hesitation. No apology. The room shifted again, this time not with fear but resistance. We are not surrendering our sovereignty, the Arbiter's representative said firmly. Elias nodded once. Then you're choosing extinction. The bluntness hit harder than any threat. You don't get partial control against something that rewrites reality, he continued. You don't get committees, debates, or divided command structures. He stepped closer, his gaze locking onto each of them in turn. You get one chance to respond faster than it evolves. And if we disagree, a delegate challenged. Elias held their stare. Then you die slower. Silence crushed the room again. Outside the viewport, distant stars shimmered, calm, unchanged, indifferent. For now, the envoy leader exhaled slowly. You're asking us to trust the very species we exiled. Elias tilted his head slightly. No, he said. I'm telling you to decide whether your pride is worth more than your survival. That one landed deep. Because it wasn't political. It was personal. Another delegate stepped forward, voice quieter now. If we give you this control, what guarantees do we have? Elias didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned away, walking toward the far edge of the chamber. For a moment, it looked like he might ignore the question entirely. Then he stopped. None, he said. The word echoed. Clean. Final. You have no guarantees, he continued. Not with us, not with the null, not with anything that's coming. He looked back at them. The only thing I can offer you is a chance. A chance, the Arbiter's representative repeated. Elias nodded. To survive long enough to matter. Another silence followed, but this one was different. Heavier. Decisive. The envoy leader closed their eyes briefly. When they opened them again, something had shifted. Not confidence. Not certainty. But acceptance. We've already lost 8 systems, they said quietly. Billions of lives, entire fleets, and we still don't understand what we're facing. They looked around at the others. One by one, the resistance faded, replaced by something far more dangerous. Resolve. We can't fight this alone, the leader continued, and pretending otherwise is exactly how we got here. The Arbiter's representative hesitated the longest. Then slowly, they inclined their head. A gesture of agreement. A gesture that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. Very well, the Arbiter's voice echoed through the chamber, transmitted live from the council core. We accept your terms. No ceremony. No conditions. Just surrender to necessity. Elias didn't react immediately. He simply watched them for a moment longer, as if confirming the decision was real. Then he nodded once. Good. The word carried no triumph. Only readiness. Because we don't have time to second-guess this. He moved back to the central display and reactivated it. The galaxy returned, no longer orderly, no longer controlled. Now it looked like a battlefield. First priority, Elias said, his voice shifting into command. Containment lines, we isolate affected regions before the spread accelerates. Data streams began updating instantly, human systems interfacing directly with council networks. It wasn't integration. It was takeover. Second, he continued, we mobilize every available fleet, not to attack but to delay. Delay, someone asked. Elias didn't look away from the display. Yes. A system on the map flickered, then collapsed. Gone. Because right now, he said quietly, we're not trying to win. The room went still. Elias zoomed the map outward again, highlighting the expanding zones of erasure. We're trying to survive long enough to figure out how. The implication hit harder than anything before it. This wasn't a war they were entering. It was a race against something that was already ahead. Elias' voice dropped slightly. And if we fail... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Because now, they all understood exactly what was at stake. Not territory, not power, not even survival, but existence itself. And for the first time in their history, the Galactic Council had handed control of that existence. To humanity, the fleet assembled in silence. Not the ceremonial silence of unity, but the tense, coiled stillness of something bracing for impact. For the first time in recorded history, the Galactic Council's armadas stood under a single command that wasn't their own. Human command. Across thousands of vessels, unfamiliar directives streamed into alien systems. Formation shifts, energy redistribution, weapon recalibration, entire doctrines rewritten in minutes. They're overriding half our protocols, one council officer muttered. Good, another replied quietly. Ours weren't working. At the center of it all, aboard a human flagship that seemed more machine than vessel, Elias Varn stood watching the battlefield projection. A system recently marked by null activity pulsed in front of him. Unstable, flickering at the edges like reality itself was thinning. That's where we hit them, he said. A council strategist frowned. We don't even know if it will still be there when we arrive. Elias didn't look at them. It will be. Why? A brief pause. Because it hasn't finished feeding. That word again. Not attacking. Not conquering. Feeding. The fleet jumped. Space folded, and for a fraction of a second, even the most advanced minds aboard felt something wrong, like passing through a place that shouldn't exist. Then they arrived. And saw it. The system was still there, barely. Stars dimmed unnaturally, as if their light was being drained. Planetary orbits had begun to distort. Gravity itself seemed unstable, shifting in subtle, nauseating ways. And at the center, the null, it didn't look the same as before. It was larger, denser. Its form pulsed with layered distortions, folding in on itself like a wound that refused to close. Sensors immediately began to fail. Visual confirmation only, an officer reported. Everything else is degrading. Elias stepped forward slightly. Good, that means it's aware of us. A ripple of unease spread across the command deck. That's good, someone asked. Elias' voice didn't waver. It means we're not irrelevant. The fleet held position for exactly 3 seconds. Then Elias gave the order. Fire. The void erupted. Thousands of weapons discharged in perfect synchronization. Energy beams, kinetic strikes, gravitational distorters. The combined force was enough to annihilate planets. It hit the null. Or rather, it disappeared into it. No explosion. No resistance. Just absorption. It's not working, a council commander shouted. Of course it isn't, Elias said calmly. That was never the point. He raised his hand. Phase 2. Human vessels surged forward, breaking formation in a move that made several alien captains hesitate in shock. They're closing distance. Hold your positions, Elias ordered sharply. Do not follow. The human ships moved with terrifying precision, weaving through gravitational distortions that would have torn standard vessels apart. Deploy anchors. Devices launched from their hulls, small, dark, almost insignificant compared to the scale of the battlefield. They struck the edges of the null's form. For a moment, nothing happened. Then space reacted. A low, invisible ripple spread outward, like tension snapping into place. The null slowed. Not stopped completely, but slowed enough to notice. "That's impossible," a council scientist whispered. "No," Elias replied. "It's physics you haven't had to learn yet." The distortion tightened, held in place by the anchors like something pinned to reality itself. Elias didn't waste the moment. "Charge the core driver," a new energy signature built at the front of the human flagship. Not bright, not explosive, but heavy, as if the weapon itself bent space just by existing. Fire. The shot launched, silent, dense, unstoppable. It struck the null, and this time, something changed. The distortion recoiled. A visible ripple passed through it like pain. Across the fleet, shock turned into something dangerous. "Hope. We hit it," someone shouted. "It's reacting. It's working." Elias didn't celebrate. Didn't even blink. Because he was watching something else. The null's shape began to shift. Subtly at first. Then faster. The edges sharpened, the distortion stabilized. Its movement changed, no longer drifting but adjusting. "Adapting. Pull back the forward ships," Elias ordered immediately. "Why?" a commander asked. "We have it contained." "No," Elias said, his voice cutting through the rising excitement. "We had it surprised." A pulse surged from the null. One of the anchor points flickered, then vanished. Not destroyed. Erased. Another followed. Then another. "It's breaking free." "Fall back," Elias snapped. Human ships disengaged instantly, retreating with practiced precision. The Council fleets, slower to react, hesitated for half a second too long. It was enough. The null moved. Not fast. Not violently. But with absolute certainty. A single Council cruiser sat in its path. For a brief moment, its hull shimmered, systems trying to compensate, shields flaring instinctively. Then, it folded, compressed into nothing. Gone. No wreckage. No signal. Just absence. The battlefield went silent again. Hope died just as quickly as it had formed. Elias stared at the shifting distortion, his jaw tightening slightly. "Of course," he murmured. The null's form stabilized further, its reactions now sharper, more direct. It had learned. Already. He turned back to the fleet. "All units regroup, new formation." No panic in his voice. No hesitation. Just urgency. Because now they knew the truth. They hadn't weakened it. They had taught it. And the next time they attacked, it wouldn't be caught off guard. It would be ready. Elias exhaled slowly, eyes locked on the evolving void. "Adjust strategy," he said quietly. Behind him, the galaxy burned. Ahead of him, something far worse was beginning. Because the null wasn't just adapting to their weapons. It was adapting to them. The second engagement didn't feel like a battle. It felt like a correction. The fleet regrouped under Elias' command, formations tighter, protocols harsher, every ship running on stripped-down efficiency. There was no more optimism, only calculation. Across the command deck, casualty reports streamed in. 43% total losses across Council fleets. Human losses at 21% and rising. Multiple sectors destabilizing, containment lines failing. Elias read it all without expression. "Update evacuation corridors," he said. "Prioritize population clusters over infrastructure." "We're abandoning entire systems," a council officer protested. Elias finally looked at him. "Yes," he said simply, "we are." The officer didn't argue again. Because outside the viewport, a star collapsed. Not exploded. Collapsed inward, dimming into nothing as the null passed through its system like a shadow devouring light. The fleet held distance this time. No reckless advance. No premature attack. They had learned. But so had it. "Contact expanding," a sensor analyst reported. Its mass, or whatever passes for mass, is increasing. It's adapting faster with each encounter. Elias nodded once. Of course it is. The room fell quiet again. That answer didn't comfort anyone. It confirmed their worst fear. A transmission cut through the silence. The Galactic Council. Live. Commander Varn, the Arbiter's voice echoed, strained in a way no one had heard before. We are losing entire sectors. Your strategy is not holding. Elias didn't turn to face the projection. It was never meant to hold, he said. A pause. Then what is the objective? The Arbiter demanded. Elias stared at the battlefield, at the spreading void, the collapsing stars, the lines that no longer meant anything. To buy time. Silence. For what? The Arbiter pressed. Elias finally turned. And for the first time, there was something in his expression that hadn't been there before. Wait. We needed to confirm something, he said. The Arbiter's tone sharpened. Confirm what? Elias didn't hesitate. That we can't win like this. The words landed harder than any loss report. You're saying this war is unwinnable, a delegate demanded. I'm saying, Elias replied evenly, that fighting it as we are now guarantees extinction. Another silence followed, but this one cracked. Because this wasn't fear anymore. This was inevitability. Then give us another option, the Arbiter said, voice low, because what you're describing is the end. Elias exhaled slowly. There is another option. Every eye in the chamber fixed on him. Hope didn't rise this time. It waited. Careful. Suspicious. It's not a strategy, Elias continued. It's a contingency. Define it, the Arbiter said. Elias walked toward the center of the command deck, bringing up a sealed data layer. It pulsed differently from everything else, isolated, heavily restricted. We designed it during the early null encounters, he said, after we realized conventional warfare wasn't enough. What does it do? Someone asked. Elias paused, just long enough for the tension to sharpen. It changes us. Confusion rippled through the room. Changes how? Elias activated the data. Simulations filled the space, human ships shifting structure, energy patterns mutating, signals warping into forms that no longer resembled anything biological or mechanical. We studied the null, he said, not just how it destroys, but how it exists. A council scientist leaned forward, eyes widening. You're trying to replicate it. No, Elias said. The correction was immediate. Not replicate. He looked at them, really looked this time. Adapt beyond it. Silence felt like a collapse. You're proposing transformation at a species level, the Arbiter said slowly. Yes. That's not strategy, another delegate whispered. That's surrender of identity. Elias didn't argue. Because it wasn't wrong. If we remain what we are, he said, we die, it's that simple. And if you do this, the Arbiter asked. Elias' gaze hardened. Then we become something it can't erase. The words echoed through the chamber, alien, heavy, irreversible. And what happens to you? The envoy leader asked quietly. Elias didn't answer immediately. For the first time since they had met him again, he hesitated. Just slightly. Unknown, he said finally. That honesty hit harder than anything else. You're asking us to trust a solution that might destroy you, the Arbiter said. Elias nodded. And save you. The room fractured into silence again. Because now the choice was clear. Not between victory and defeat, but between extinction and transformation. And if we refuse, a delegate asked, though their voice already carried the answer. Elias met their gaze. Then you keep fighting, he said, and eventually there's nothing left to lose. No threat, no pressure, just truth. The Arbiter's projection dimmed slightly, processing, calculating, weighing the cost. Across the battlefield, another fleet vanished. Gone in an instant. The decision was already being made. Slowly, reluctantly, but inevitably. Elias turned back to the stars, watching the null expand, adapt, consume. His voice dropped almost to himself. "We tried to stay human last time," he said quietly. No one responded. Because they didn't need to ask what happened. Elias' eyes hardened again. This time, he didn't finish the sentence. But the meaning was clear. This time, they wouldn't make the same mistake, even if it meant losing everything that made them who they were. Because survival had a price, and humanity had already decided. They were willing to pay it. The order was never broadcast publicly. It wasn't debated. It wasn't explained. It was simply executed. Across human-controlled space, sealed directives unlocked simultaneously. Fleets halted mid-operation. Stations shifted into dormant configurations. Entire networks rerouted power into systems the Council had never seen before, systems that didn't appear on any shared schematics. "What are they doing?" a Council observer whispered. No one answered, because no one knew. At the center of it all, aboard the flagship, Elias Varn stood alone in the transformation chamber. No armor, no command interface. Just him and the quiet hum of something vast beginning to wake. A voice echoed softly through the chamber. "Final confirmation required." Elias closed his eyes. For a brief moment, memories surfaced. Earth's sky, the chaos of early wars, the long silence of exile, the first encounter with the null. Everything that had led here. "Proceed," he said. The chamber responded instantly. Light didn't flood the room. It folded. Space bent inward, compressing around him. Not violently, but with controlled precision, like reality itself was being rewritten at a microscopic level. Outside, the fleet began to change. Ships shifted form, not mechanically, but structurally. Hulls dissolved into layered patterns of energy and matter that no longer followed standard design principles. Signals warped, no longer readable as simple transmissions. "They're disappearing," a Council technician said, panic rising. "Our sensors can't lock onto them." "They're still there," another replied, voice unsteady. "We just can't define them anymore." The transformation spread like a controlled cascade. Humanity wasn't vanishing. It was transitioning, becoming something that existed between known states, no longer fully bound by the same rules the null exploited. And for the first time, the null reacted before they engaged it. Across the battlefield, its form shifted abruptly, ripples passing through its distortion faster than before. "Contact is responding," an analyst reported, "but it's different." "How?" the Arbiter demanded. A pause. Then, "It's hesitating." Silence followed that word. Because hesitation implied something impossible. Uncertainty. The transformed human fleet moved. Not in formation. Not in predictable vectors. They flowed through space, across gravitational distortions, around the edges of reality itself. Their presence didn't push against the null. It intersected with it. Elias stood at the center of it all. He could feel it. The shift. The loss. The expansion. He was still aware. Still thinking. But the boundaries of self had begun to blur. It didn't matter. "Now," he said. His voice didn't travel through speakers. It resonated across the entire transformed network. The attack began. No beams. No missiles. No traditional weapons. Instead, space itself reacted. Regions of the null's form began to destabilize, not from force, but from incompatibility, like two opposing states of existence colliding. The null surged in response. Faster, more aggressive. It adapted, but not fast enough. For the first time, it wasn't consuming. It was being resisted, pushed, denied. Across the battlefield, entire sections of the distortion flickered, losing cohesion, struggling to maintain its form. "It's retreating," someone shouted from the Council fleet. At first, no one believed it. Then they saw it. the edges of the null pulling back, contracting, receding into the tier it had created. Not defeated, but driven away. The final clash tore through the system, stars destabilizing, gravity fluctuating wildly, space itself screaming under the strain. And then, it was over. The tier closed. The distortion vanished. The null was gone. Silence followed. Not the heavy silence of fear, but something stranger. Absence. The Council fleet drifted in place, systems recalibrating, sensors struggling to read a battlefield that no longer made sense. "We did it," a voice whispered. "We survived." Cheers didn't come, because something was wrong. "Where are the human ships?" a technician asked. Scanning arrays swept the region. Nothing. No signals. No debris. No trace. "They were here," someone insisted. "They were right there." Elias' flagship gone. The transformed fleet gone. Every trace of their presence erased. But not like the null erased things. This was different. Deliberate. Controlled. The Arbiter's voice cut through the silence. "Open all channels. Broadcast to human command." The message echoed across the system. No response. Again. Nothing. Days passed. Then weeks. Search operations expanded, sweeping beyond the battlefield, across nearby sectors into deep space. Still nothing. It was as if humanity had stepped outside reality itself, and simply never stepped back. Months turned into years. The galaxy rebuilt slowly, cautiously, haunted by what it had nearly lost. And by what it no longer had. At the far edge of known space, a long-range probe picked up something unusual. A distortion. Faint. Stable. Watching. It didn't approach. It didn't communicate. It simply remained there, at the boundary between what was known and what wasn't. Observing. Waiting. Protecting. Or preparing. No one could tell. But one truth settled across the galaxy like a quiet, permanent shadow. They had begged humanity to return. And humanity had answered. Just not in the way anyone expected. Because the beings that saved them were no longer human. And whatever they had become, even the void had learned to fear it.